Hello, this is Pastor Mike, and this is the second session of A Reasonable Faith entitled What is Truth? This session. Once again, we had technical difficulties with the recording of the class, and so I'm going to take a few moments here and do a video summary for those who missed the class. This won't have everything in it that I said last Tuesday night, but it will at least cover the basics, and I would encourage you to give a listen through it. The handout is available online, or you can just pick it up from me. Also, we have online PDF that has all the PowerPoint slides, which include the answers for the fill-ins. So I'd encourage you to have this on, have the handout out. You don't have to watch me; it's just my talking head, but you can follow along the handout while I speak and provide this summary of what we talked about in the second session. What is truth? We start off looking at John 18:33 to 36, 33 to 38, the dialogue between Jesus and Pontius Pilate, in which Jesus, in verse 37, says, "You say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into the world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me." And Pilate responded, "What is truth?" We don't know if he was being sarcastic or actually inquisitive. Did he really want to know what the truth was, wanted Jesus to elaborate, or was he being dismissive of the whole idea of a kingdom being built on truth? Regardless, his question, what is truth, is a very vital, important, and much asked question today, given our philosophical contexts, with the confluence of modernism giving way to postmodernism. Christianity, we talk a lot about truth. It's very important to us, but as the expression goes, truth ain't what it used to be. And that complicates and makes much more difficult and nuanced the whole apologetic task of dealing with reason and evidence as to why the Christian faith is reasonable and rational. So this session, we're getting a little philosophical. We're going to talk about some more of the philosophical underpinnings of what's going on in our culture, what it means, how we see it, how to spot it, and hopefully how to ask questions to engage in meaningful conversation to help people better understand what they believe, what they claim to believe, and why they believe it. Now, first, I'm still on page 1 of the handout. We did a little review of session 1, in which the main point was that the most important apologetic evidence to place before the world is the behavior of Christians. That we will never have a hearing, we'll never have a credible hearing in the world unless we are behaving in a consistent manner with what we say we believe. How then should we live? Well, as humble servants. That's just so crucial. We got a great model for that, and that's what Jesus did. Living like Jesus, following him, humbly serving the world, looking for opportunities to serve. That's the big answer that came out in this book that I talked about last week, about how to live in a world that thinks that Christianity is extremist and irrelevant. And that is, be in the world, serving at every opportunity. So what we're trying to do here is through St. John's, or some of our church-sponsored or functioned service, like the Mission Farm, or Comfort Dog, or the Table, or large print ministry. But it's something that each one of us is called to every day in our homes, in our workplaces, in the neighborhoods. Serve. And at this point on Tuesday, we spent a little time talking in the tables about thinking about somebody in our lives that does not follow Christ, is not a disciple, not a Christian, that probably needs to hear some of the stuff we're talking about, and somebody that we may is a good potential to need to have some apologetic conversation. And so we spent a few minutes just going around the tables. I asked everybody to identify one person, tell just a little bit about them, and then we were to write those down in the handout and then pray for these people and commit to pray for these people. And also I wanted to do this because as we go through this, this type of material, it's easy for us as Christians to start feeling arrogant and cocky, if you will. Like, oh, I mean, we have the answers, and like these people who don't get it, we can't look down at people. That's death to witness, to look down on people. We need to keep in mind that it isn't just questions, it's the questioners, the people that are around us that we care about, that are our friends and our family members. We care about them, we love them, and we want the truth for them. So we pray for them and keep in mind that that ultimately what we're about is not winning arguments, it's not scoring points, it's not destroying somebody, as you hear in all these, the way they like to word things online these days. It's sharing the truth in a loving, gentle way. 1 Peter 3:15, 16. So that they can share in what we have in Jesus. Okay, now diving into the meat of this lesson, meta-narrative and truth. That may be a new word for you, meta-narrative. It's a word coming out of philosophy that's used to describe an overarching story or storyline that gives meaning, purpose, and context to our lives. It's the big picture of life. That there's order, there's meaning, there's a purpose. Life is going somewhere. The universe is going somewhere. There's a story that helps make it all make sense and speaks to what my place, my meaning, my purpose is. Now I'm on to page 2. The Christian meta-narrative, if you will. Our worldview, our story view is really pretty simple. That God made the world, creation, that's the first fill-in. The world's broken, the fall. God had a plan out of his love to redeem the world, so redemption, the third part of it. And ultimately, God will restore all things in the new creation. The new creation is the fourth part of it. So that's the Christian narrative. There's a beginning, there's a goal, it's all good, there's a happy ending. We have a role to play. We are fallen, but we are part of the redemption in the sense that we are commissioned to live that redemption and share that redemption. So that it gives meaning to our lives, it gives purpose for our lives, who we are, a context for our identity. So that's what a meta-narrative does. Now, modernity, modernism, that is the philosophical movement that began, that took off in the Enlightenment and is still kind of hanging on a little bit. The meta-narrative of modernity is that we humans, through our reason, our intellect, and our rational faculties, we can figure it all out. We can figure everything out. We can solve any problem. Technology, brains, science, research, our reason alone is going to make this world a better place. Progress. So the key elements for the modernity meta-narrative is reason and progress. Our human reason will inevitably yield in progress. And we see that in terms of the incredible progress in science, understanding, technology, and so forth. It is a meta-narrative, though, the next fill-in, with no meta-narrator. No meta-narrator. There's no need for God, because our reason will figure everything out. Now some of the in the Enlightenment, some of the early Enlightenment people, they believed in God. They're theists, but they were technically deists. Their view of God was that he was a creator because they had no explanation for how things got here. He was creator, but then he just really isn't too involved after that. After that, everything is just the natural world and how the natural world works. So we're going to figure out that natural world and make it the best it can possibly be. But God really doesn't get involved. So essentially, in terms of how we live our lives today, it's a meta-narrative without a meta-narrator, because the meta-narrator, story is over. He's done. That's modernity. Now, postmodernism, looking at the slideshow here too on my pad. The postmodernism, though, is a movement that began in the late 60s, early 70s, and it really grew out of some growing skepticism about the whole modernity meta-narrative. Are we really getting better? We develop incredible science and technology, and we use it to blow up an atom bomb and killed numerous people. That every advancement in technology has also been used for evil. Are we getting better? Or are we just getting better with making better tools and better toys? So there's a skepticism, or sometimes the word is used, incredulity about meta-narratives. It's really focused at the modernism meta-narrative, but then ultimately in real full-blown postmodernism, it's incredulity regarding all meta-narratives, Christian, Islam, anyway. There are no meta-narratives. There is no meta-narrative. That first fill in. There is no overarching story. The universe isn't necessarily going anywhere. It hasn't come from anywhere. There's no context. There's nothing that is happening. There's no progress. It's rejection of the myth of progress and the American dream, those kinds of things. There's no meta-narrator. So both modernism, postmodernism have a real hard time with what we would call biblical theism. So no meta-narrator. There is only your narrative. That's all that exists. Your narrative, your story, your experience, your own personal context. That's where truth is defined. Your individual truth. So when other people have their truth and their meta-narrative that they're trying to impose on you in their life, it's really just about power. They're trying to have power over you and trying to impose what their narrative, their own narrative, and trying to pretend that it's a meta-narrative when there's not. So you see how this works? So postmodernism is very different than modernism. So here's some examples of how these two work, just to help understand the difference between modernism and postmodernism. Because sometimes we want to lump in the non-Christian, non-believing thinking person all in the same bucket, but they're not all in the same bucket because these are two very different philosophies. For instance, the statement, if I gave you proof for what I believe, would you believe it? Pure modernism would say yes, because you gave me proof. That's modernism is always in pursuit of truth, in pursuit of proof of the truth, empirically researched and verified. Postmodern, however, if I gave you proof for what I believe, would you believe it? The postmodernist would say, maybe, whatever. It might prove something for you, but not for me. It's not my life. It's not my story. You just prove something for you. How do I even trust that you're looking at the world the same way? It's very different, a little different. Another one that's very contemporary today is looking at how we view what's called gender dysphoria. A biological male identifying as female. I'm simplifying here, but just to illustrate the difference between these two philosophies. In modernism, it is more objective and proof. The body is objective. We can do DNA testing and say, every cell in this body is male, therefore you are male, therefore your thinking is wrong, your mind is wrong, and that's why for many years, gender dysphoria is considered a mental illness. Okay? Your body's right, mind is wrong. Now today, postmodernism, the only thing that truth is not derived in a laboratory. Truth is not derived from a chemistry or biochemistry test. Truth is derived from your own narrative, your own perspective, your own truth. So, the mind determines personal truth, therefore the body is wrong. If you identify as female, even though your body's male, you are female because that's your narrative, that's your story, that's your truth. So let's change the body. It's a completely different approach, completely different outcome. And that explains some of that real tension on that issue today. Modernistic thinking, postmodern thinking. It's also illustrated, I like this one because I like Star Trek. You can look at two Star Trek characters and see a little picture of it. In the original series, Spock. Spock represents modernism. He is human or half human, and he longs to be a being of pure reason. He wants to be logical all the time. Pure reason, logic, rational thinking, and denies that he has emotions. He's denying his humanity. He wants to be a being of pure logic. Star Trek Next Generation introduced a character called Data, who's an android, a being that is pure logic, pure reason, devoid of emotions, and he wants to become human. He wants to have emotions. He wants to feel, because he realizes that reason isn't enough. It leaves him dissatisfied. If he could feel that. So it's really fascinating to look at those two characters, and you see the shift. One show from the 60s, the next one from the 80s, modern, postmodern. Okay, what does all this mean? Let's tie this all together and with some conclusions going forward. There are, really important to keep this in mind, there are positives and negative features in all cultures and worldviews. All of them. Every culture has its plus sides. Every culture has its negatives. The same with philosophies. There are positive things in these philosophical trends. There are very positives in modernism, which we're going to talk about. There's positives in postmodernism. There's also negatives. This is behind it all from a theological standpoint. Why? All worldviews and cultures give expression to these two things. All humans are made in the image of God. We are all made in God's image. We are creators. We are blessed with that innate connection. Romans 2:14 and 15, the natural law is put on our hearts. So we should not be surprised when people who do not know anything about Christ are very, very good people, because God's wired it into us. And when people, that's image of God. At the same time, we are a fallen creation. We are damaged. We are broken. All cultures, all philosophies. So you will find all cultures and philosophies, this mix of here's a reflection of the image of God, and here's a reflection of our brokenness. And it's a different mix as you go through them. For instance, what's positive in modernism, for me, I think about it, it is the pursuit of truth, and the confidence that we can have in reason, and what that's yielded in terms of science and better understanding of the world. Modernism and the Enlightenment has brought great blessing. It's also, if you like our country, if you like America, it is a product of the Enlightenment. The philosophy that led to Jefferson and company writing the Declaration, and the style of government that they came up with in the Constitution. It is an Enlightenment, modernism, through and through. It is reason. There's no appeal to the divine right of kings and things like that, which was a part of the previous era. There's positive things in modernism. There's positives in postmodernism as well. Greater humility, and humility about reason, the limits of reason. And there's more openness to alternative answers. Less confidence that we can figure it all out. So I think that's a very positive thing. More openness to seeing the value in other cultures, in other worldviews. That's all very positive as well. Now, as I said, both modernism and postmodernism deny that there's a meta-narrator. So presenting the case for God, presenting evidence for theism, which we'll get to next week, is really critical for in talking to both modernistic and postmodern people. But the objections may be different. A modernistic approach, putting it very simplistic, is I don't buy this God stuff because you can't prove it. If you can prove it, maybe, but you can't prove it to me. Postmodern will reject on the basis of, well, that's just your truth. It's not my truth. It hasn't worked for me. It works for you, great, fine, live your life, do your Jesus thing. But it just doesn't connect with me. That's postmodern. Now, you may have heard that from somebody. Maybe somebody you wrote down on that list. You may have heard both from the same person. Because here's the thing that complicates all this, is that most people are a mixture of modernism and postmodernism. that we are in this transition and these big philosophical trends. We're at the waning edge of modernism, and postmodernism is still on the ascendancy. And so for a lot of people, they're a mix. And I think by myself, I'm a mix of different things. A lot of people are postmodern on the surface, on their head, with saying things like, oh, I don't think there's absolute truth. There's no absolute morals. I don't impose my morals on you. That's very postmodern things to say. But then you push down deeper, they're modernists. There are morals. There is truth. There is absolute truth. So a lot of people are just kind of a hodgepodge of postmodernism and modernism. And most people have not really examined why they believe what they believe. Their beliefs are very much on the surface, influenced a lot by what has influenced them. We'll get to that in a minute. But they've not really dug deep. They may have never been asked to articulate actually what they believe by somebody that wasn't just a close friend who's going to nod their head and agree with them. And most have not been pressed on, well, why do you believe that? How did you come to believe that? Have you considered what that means in this context? So that's a pretty critical issue. Now, postmodernism is on, like I said, on the ascendancy. It's been for the last 20, 30 years. And it's being actively promoted, that type of thinking. The effects of it are being promoted through the media. TV, movies, many movies will promote this pluralistic thinking regarding religions, but also the idea of no absolute truth, no absolute morals, it's all over the place. I mean, too many examples. But as a philosophical movement, it is actively taught in universities, and especially non-Christian universities. So, expect if you send your kids to a non-Christian state school, they will be well catechized in postmodernistic thinking, which where you see a lot of the clashes of taking place in our world today on the university campuses, and a lot of it can be looked at. One of the perspectives on it is it's a clash between modernism and postmodernism. So, all right, so what do we do in this kind of context? We ask questions. I'm going to move into being practical about, this is the context. We've got these philosophical movements interplayed and present in our world and present in people's minds. How do we engage in meaningful discussion, dialogue with people? Ask questions. Our call is not necessarily to go out and preach, to lecture, to browbeat, to hammer. No, you won't have the credibility, you won't be listened to, it isn't the right approach anyhow. As I said, most people have a mixture of beliefs that aren't always consistent. I just mentioned modernism, postmodernism. You probably find a lot of people who are part modern, postmodern, deist, New Age, and Christian, all jumbled up, and have not really critically examined it or been gently, lovingly challenged on it. So we ask questions, seeking to understand them before being understood myself. If you ever read Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, that's one of them. Seek to understand before being understood. Or the prayer of St. Francis, that goes way back before Stephen Covey. Was part of his prayer is to understand before being understood. If I'm trying to help somebody whom I consider to be lost, one of the first things I got to find out before I can help them is where they are. I can't just guess. I got to know where they are. And I can only find that out by asking questions. So I'm going to seek to find out what people believe and then encourage them to critically articulate why they believe it. This does a couple of things. It opens up discussion where you are hopefully genuinely interested. You want to know We care about people, so let's find out what their world's like. And we ask questions about how they think and what they believe and why they believe it. That'll help us, a little further down the road when we talk about things to watch for to come back with follow-up questions on. But also, one other thing that it does, when I spend time asking you what you believe and why you believe it, most people at some point are going to start feeling like it's the only friendly, neighborly thing to do, to turn around and ask, now what do you believe? Why do you believe it? There you go. Always be ready to give a reason for the hope that you have. So, best way to be asked about what you believe is to ask somebody else about what they believe. Okay, now resuming on page 5 of the handout, some things to listen for. And these are things to listen for and how people answer and what they say. And the point is not to be nitpicky and be like hammering on people over every little thing they say that isn't quite kosher, but rather to invite people to examine their beliefs more closely. And these are some things that are commonly said that can provide an opportunity to dig in a bit deeper. The first category is what I'd call logical inconsistencies. And these are statements that, because many people haven't critically examined their own beliefs, they're often unaware of the logical inconsistencies behind them. The most frequent example is applying a standard or a critique to others without applying it to yourself or to what you're saying. And this is very common. So what we did at the class is I put up some of these inconsistencies on the screen, and we talked about them. I'm going to go through them a little briefly because you can just push the button and stop if you want to think about them. But the first one is simply, we were looking at what is logical inconsistency, and then what kind of questions could we ask to carry on the conversation. Because we don't want to just hammer somebody like, what you just said, that wasn't consistent. It's asking. So tell me more about what you just said. Why did you say that? Have you considered? So here's the first one, is there's no such thing as absolute truth. You hear that a lot. And it's almost hilarious how simple this inconsistency is to spot, because that statement purports to be an absolute truth. It's internally inconsistent. And that's one of the things that we see in these kind of statements, is that the person making the statement about reality puts themselves outside of reality, puts themselves outside of the universe as though they're a judge or God, meta-narrator. That they have special knowledge that applies to others but not to them. They have the privilege of knowing absolute truth, but everybody else in the world can't have it. So it's kind of weird. But that's a very common one. No such thing as absolute truth. No such thing as absolute moral principles. Well, that's an absolute moral principle. So questions to ask. Why do you feel that way? How did you come to that conclusion? Have you considered do you believe that statement applies all the time? Well, then that would make it an absolute truth. Have you considered that? Here's another one. We should only believe things that can be proven empirically. Now, that's a big hallmark of modernism. Problem with that statement is that statement cannot be proven empirically, therefore it should not be believed. And so you got a circular unproof going on. All you need is to love one another. All the problems happen when we start asserting doctrine as true. And the problem here is that all you need is to love one another. If you're talking about religion, that's a doctrinal statement. So once again, the person's putting themselves outside and having a different standard for themselves than for what they're critiquing. So why do you believe all you need is love? How did you come to that conclusion? And have you considered that by stating that the only thing that matters in religion is loving one another, that's a doctrinal statement? That's a statement of faith, a belief statement. That's a creed. Okay. At this point on Tuesday night, we went into groups at our tables, and we have the next group of questions, which were admittedly statements a little more subtle, a little more difficult, but just trying to get some discussion going about analyzing them. A lot of the question follow-up for all these would be similar, and that is, tell me more about it. Why do you believe that? How did you come to that conclusion? Have you considered ... So here's the first one. Each religion sees part of the spiritual truth, but none can see the whole truth. How do you know that? Do you see the whole truth? You see the inconsistency there? That's similar to the whole the elephant story about the different people, the blind men, touching different parts of the elephant, and everybody having a wrong conclusion about what the elephant is. Well, even telling the story bespeaks that the storyteller knows that it's an elephant, has a vantage point outside of the story, which is meta-narrator, and is denying the thing that the story is, that the statement is making. Each religion sees part of the spiritual truth, but me, I see the whole thing. Wow. Okay. The next one, religious belief is too culturally and historically conditioned to be considered truth. Once again, that is a religious statement. That is a statement about religion, about what is to be believed. The statement is saying that all those statements are historically and culturally conditioned. That would mean the statement that I just made is culturally and historically conditioned. That my postmodern belief only exists because it's been culturally conditioned into me, therefore it should not be considered true. Now you've got a real chasing of the tail there to talk about anything. And that's one of the problems in postmodernism. At some point, dialogue and knowledge tends to kind of break down. Next one, it is arrogant to assert that your religion is right and convert others to it. Now, if I was really, depending on who I was talking to, if I had a good relationship with him and I was feeling a little flippant, I might immediately say, are you trying to convert me to that way of thinking? So you see the logical inconsistency there. That it's arrogant to assert your religion is right, except for me making that statement. That's not arrogant. It's arrogant to convert others to your opinion, to your religious opinion, but it's fine for me to try to convert you to my opinion. Wow. But people say this stuff all the time without seeing it. That's what I mean about not really critically examine what we believe and why we believe it. And that's why we as Christians, we need to do this work, the discipleship work of knowing what we believe and why we believe it, knowing the core teachings of our faith, knowing why we believe them, where they come from in the Scriptures, and how they fit into the whole Christian meta-narrative, how they fit into my role as a child of God who has received God's blessing and have been called into mission. I need to know what and why for myself before I talk to others. There can't be just one true religion. That is the hallmark of what's called religious pluralism, a real central point of postmodernism. The problem with it is the belief in pluralism, the whole coexist bumper sticker thing, the belief in pluralism is a religion. It is a religious viewpoint, which purports to be what? The one true religion. So, logical inconsistency. So it's taking those all together in dialogue may help somebody see that the parts of Christianity or theism that are often rejected out of hand, there's really no basis to reject them because everybody does it. That secularism, postmodernism, naturalism all act like exclusive religions, all function like exclusive religions. And so when a criticism is made for Christianity being exclusive or arrogant or trying to convert, the exact same complaint can be made about secularism. That's the point. That's logical inconsistencies. Next one is philosophy presented as science. Sometimes people think they're being scientific, when actually they are just making a philosophical assertion which is unprovable, cannot be proven, but is rather a philosophical starting point for doing science. As I wrote in the handout, one of the critiques of theism is that it's built on unprovable assertions, unlike science. Modernism is committed to building only on that which can be proven empirically. But is this consistently applied? Every worldview, every belief, even the laws of science are ultimately built upon unprovable assertions when you go down to the bottom level. The real question is which assertions are the most plausible explanation for the world and our experiences in it. So, saying something like there is nothing beyond the physical natural world. There's nothing beyond. That's typical modernism. There's nothing beyond the physical natural world. That's not science. That's a philosophical statement. That's an unprovable assertion that provides the starting point for only considering natural solutions to what you see. No supernatural cause for any natural phenomenon is possible. That's completely unprovable. But it's also an assertion, a philosophical assertion, in support of naturalism as a starting point. The laws of science are unchanging and constant. Well, that's a fun one. We assume that to be true. We don't know it's true. Is the gravitational constant going to be the same tomorrow? We assume it is because it seems like it's been that way, although you can make a case that it's shifted. But why are there laws? Why does gravity work? Why do the forces exist that hold atoms together? Where'd they come from? Why do they happen? Science is really good, has gotten increasingly excellent at describing the world and describing it on both the micro and the meta side, the macro side, I mean. But we don't know why. We don't know how it got there. And don't know why the laws work. Why? We can tell them, well, F equals ma, but why? Gravity attracts, mass attracts. Why? We don't know. So we can ask questions to expose some of these things. And finally, trying to prove the unprovable. We can prove or disprove concepts analytically if we all agree on the principles of logic. We're not going to get into that now, but that is not always the case in postmodernism. But if we all agree on the principles of logic, we can, like geometry, we can do geometric proofs and prove things beyond a shadow of a doubt. It's very hard to prove truth about the world. For instance, science, when it's being honest, deals in hypotheses and theories and looks for repeatable consistency. The evidence is gathered, and the scientist or the researcher seeks the most plausible explanation based on the evidence. Scientific assertions are rarely proven in the philosophical sense, and many have been revised over time. I won't get into it now. Everything that Newton proved, then Einstein kind of tweaked it, unproved it, and now Einstein's getting tweaked. So it's theories. So it's really important to keep that in mind, that science deals in theories. And so when somebody says, I'm only going to believe what science has proven, well, be careful. Science doesn't prove a whole lot. High level of confidence. I'm not being a flat earth person. Very high level of confidence, but just philosophically how we think about it. It's a gathering of the evidence and ascertaining the most plausible explanation. Looking for consistency, which then we describe as laws. We don't know where the laws came from. We don't know why they work, but they exist. And that helps us then in applying the theories into the world and making the world a place that works nicely, or coming up with ways of killing lots of people. Now, some of the unprovable things, the existence of God. Neither existence for God nor non-existence can be proven. Cannot. Sometimes a person from a modernistic or even postmodern will put the burden of proof on the theist and say, I'm not going to believe in God unless you prove. It is just as logical, just as rational, just as reasonable for the Christian to say, the burden of proof's on you. 98% of the people who ever lived on the planet believe in God. I think the burden of proof's on you. Disprove God. Unless you can disprove God, I'm going to believe in God. I mean, not a really healthy argument to make in terms of working things through, but it's certainly fair. The existence of God can neither be proven nor disproven. So when somebody says, I don't believe in God because I can prove it, turn it right around. The origin of species. Okay, we're not going to get into real depth of evolution, but just to remind everybody that evolution is a theory. It keeps getting tweaked as well, but it is a theory. It is the most plausible explanation, in the opinion of many, many, many scientists, who start with an a priori of naturalism. A philosophical assertion is made that there's no outside influence, no creator. So creation is taken off the table. Then the evidence, and that's a philosophical, that's not science, that's philosophical. Creation is taken off the table. And then you look at the evidence from a naturalistic standpoint, and you come up with evolution. Okay? That's how it works. And then the third one here, evolution applied to morality and sociology. Evolution has, which was, as Darwin presented it, as an explanation for how these different species came about. But the thought of, it's a very modernistic thing. Progress. Our reason figured out this progress. Evolution is about progress, the species getting better. And then that got applied all over the place. A guy named Karl Marx applied it to economics and got up with we're all evolving economically towards communism. It's being applied to psychology, sociology, law, and it's all part of the modernistic progress myth. It's very much tied in with taking evolution and applying it to nearly everything. We'll talk more about this. I think we'll get to it next week. The whole idea of the reason that so many people believe in God is because evolution, along the line of our evolution, it became better for the species, for its survival, to believe in God because it gave you a certain measure of peace. So it's just part of evolution. There's really no God. I'll give you a preview of how we deal with that. Your ability to think about evolution is just a product of evolution, so we can't trust it. Okay, so that's as far as we took things on Tuesday night, and a little preview of next week. We will be looking at the evidence for theism. I'm calling it that way, the evidence for theism, because we're not really getting into, at this point, the Christian God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, Trinity. We're going to deal with the idea of a personal, all-powerful, all-knowing God and the evidence for it. We cannot prove the existence of God, but we will look at the evidence and ask ourselves, what is the most plausible explanation for the evidence? Looking at two basic explanations. One is there is a God, theism. The other, there is no God, naturalism. And which one better explains? So we'll be looking at what's called the cosmological evidence. Where did things come from? Big Bang, creation, all that. We'll be looking at design evidence, or it's sometimes called teleological. The fine-tuning of the universe and creation, how that happened. What does it say about purpose and meaning? We'll look at the moral evidence. What is morality? Where did it come from? How come it matters? Really, really big topic. I like that topic. We'll also look at the evidence of art and beauty. Why is there such a thing as art? Why is there such a thing as beauty? And what does it say to this whole theism, naturalism idea? Okay, in the handout, talk about the homework, assigned homework, encouraging folks to look for evidence of modernistic, postmodernistic thinking in television shows, movies, art news articles, and just see if little light bulbs turn on. A couple of memory verses, Psalm 25, 4-5. Show me your ways, Lord. Teach me your paths. Guide me in your truth and teach me. You are God, my Savior. My hope is in you all day long. And then John 8, 31, 32, also about truth. To the Jews who had believed in him, Jesus said, if you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciples. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. And then some passages to study. John 8, 12, 59, wonderful chapter about Jesus dealing with the truth and why to believe. Genesis 1-3, just the creation and fall account in Genesis, because we're going to be talking about that, especially in dealing with the cosmological, for the first three of those, cosmological, teleological, and moral evidence for God. And then John 1 also, which speaks about the Word. So that's it for session 2. I really hope that all the recording equipment works properly for session 3 this coming Tuesday. And if you have any questions about any of this, want to talk about any of it before the class, just let me know.